Ilara sat motionless in the shadowed corner of her cold, damp cell, her knees drawn up to her chest as the relentless rain drummed a somber rhythm against the iron bars. Her dark eyes, circled by shadows of exhaustion, flicked toward the narrow window where droplets traced tear-like streaks down the glass. The dim, flickering light cast uncertain shadows across her trembling hands, clutching a worn, crumpled piece of paper. Her only confidant. Her breath hitched as she whispered under her breath, voice barely audible over the storm. "I never wanted to hurt him. I swear I didn't." Memories surged like violent waves. Her childhood, the scent of her grandfather's old leather chair, the quiet strength in his voice as he reprimanded her, the way he looked at her with a mixture of pride and unspoken pain. But now, behind these iron bars, those memories twisted into something darker, something unrecognizable. She clenched her fists, trying to suppress the gnawing dread that clawed at her mind. The image of her grandfather falling, blood pooling beneath him in that cold, silent room. Her lips trembled as she remembered the night she finally broke, voice cracking as she confided in a trembling whisper. "I killed him. I did. I strangled him in that moment of fury, of desperation, when I thought I'd lose everything." Her words echoed softly, swallowed by the rain's relentless roar outside, as if the storm itself mourned her confession. She looked away, eyes brimming with unshed tears, her voice choked with remorse. "But I was just a girl. I didn't mean for it to happen. I was too broken to see what was real anymore." Her fingers traced the jagged scar on her palm, an old reminder of a night she barely remembered, yet haunted her every waking hour. The shadows on the wall danced with her trembling movements as she pressed her forehead against the cold stone wall, whispering softly, "Did I really do it? Or did I just imagine it all?" Her heart pounded fiercely, each beat a reminder of the secret buried deep within her. A secret she had carried long before her arrest, long before the reformatory's gray walls had stitched her into silence. Yet beneath her trembling exterior lurked a fragile resolve. She knew her story wasn't over, that somewhere beneath the layers of guilt and fear lay the truth she desperately needed to uncover before her mind shattered completely. As the storm outside intensified, so did her resolve to unravel the tangled web of her memories, no matter the cost. She closed her eyes, breath shallow, and whispered one final plea into the darkness. "Please, if there's any part of you left, tell me what really happened that night." On a silent afternoon, as the rain drummed softly against the cracked stone walls of the reformatory's courtyard, Ilara sat alone beneath a gnarled oak tree, sketching hurriedly in a battered notebook. Her fingers trembled as she traced the silhouette of her childhood memories. Those fleeting moments when she and her grandfather wandered the narrow dirt paths of their overgrown garden, whispering secrets only they knew. She remembered how his voice, gravelly yet gentle, would murmur, "Keep your eyes open. Girl, there's more to life than what they show you." As they strolled beneath the towering oaks, their shadows flickering in the dappled sunlight, she sketched him there, leaning on his cane, his eyes crinkling with a warmth that now clung to her like a ghost. Her heart clenched as she recalled the way he'd sometimes whisper late at night, the kind of secrets that made her hair stand on end. "Ilara," he'd say softly, voice dropping to a hushed tone. "There are truths buried deeper than the earth in this town. Keep your ears open, and your soul ready for what you might find." Her hand faltered as she drew his face, the lines of age carved into his features, the faint smile that hid unspoken pain. Was that smile meant for comfort or concealment? She wondered. The memories felt alive, vivid, almost too vivid. And yet, beneath their tender veneer lurked something darker, something she dared not fully confront. The whispers of those walks echoed in her mind now, like ghostly lullabies, revealing not just innocence but an underlying tension she'd never dared to understand. Did he ever suspect that the innocent walks through the garden concealed a secret, one she now feared she might have uncovered too late? She pressed her pencil into the paper, the lines jagged and frantic, desperate to hold on to those fleeting images before they slipped away like shadows at dusk. Her eyes flicked toward the empty sky, the clouds thickening, threatening more rain, as her mind spun with questions. Was her innocence truly intact during those walks, or was she already caught in a web of deception spun long before her arrest? Her breath hitched as a sudden gust of wind rustled the leaves, and she whispered aloud, "Did I really love him? Or was it all a lie I told myself to feel safe?" A tear traced a cold path down her cheek, blending with the rain as she closed her eyes, yearning for the clarity those days once promised, but now seemed forever lost. The sketchbook lay open on her lap, filled with scenes she'd only partially remembered, fragments of a life she desperately wanted to piece together, each line a step closer to the truth she feared might destroy her entirely. The room was tense, thick with the scent of stale air and the oppressive weight of unspoken truths. Ilara's heart pounded relentlessly against her ribcage as the fluorescent lights flickered overhead, casting ghostly shadows across the cold metal table. She sat trembling, clutching her trembling hands tightly in her lap, desperate to hide the tremor in her voice. The detective leaned forward, eyes sharp and probing, voice gentle but relentless. "Ilara, just tell us what happened. We know you're scared, but hiding won't help." Her mind raced, the fragments of her trembling confession swirling chaotically, her voice cracking as she grappled with the gnawing dread of revelation. Suddenly, panic surged through her veins like wildfire. Her breath hitched, her palms grew clammy. Without thinking, she reached into her pocket, fingers fumbling over the crumpled note she'd scribbled earlier. Her own hurried, frantic confession that she'd murdered her grandfather. The words seemed to leap from her trembling hand as she shoved the paper across the table, voice trembling, eyes wide with terror. I did it," she whispered, voice cracking under the weight of her own betrayal. "But I didn't mean to. It was an accident." Her eyes darted nervously around the sterile room, searching for an escape, a way out of the prison of her own making. The detective's expression hardened, but he kept his voice calm. "Ilara, this isn't just about what you think you remember. We need to understand." She cut him off with a trembling sob, pressing her trembling hands to her face as if to block out the world. The confession hung in the air, raw and exposed, her trembling voice echoing the horror that had haunted her since that fateful day. In that moment, her mind fractured, memories flickering like faulty film reels. Her frantic attempt to hide the truth, the overwhelming guilt that swelled like a tidal wave, and her desperate hope to keep her secret buried deep within her. But the confession was out now, irrevocable, sealing her fate and setting her on the path to incarceration, where she would carry the weight of that night forever. Until years later, she would finally confront the devastating reality of her actions and the secrets she had long buried. The rain battered the thin, barred windows of the reformatory, a relentless percussion that seemed to echo the storm raging inside Ilara's mind. That night, a ferocious wind howled through the crumbling corridors, carrying whispers of secrets long buried. As she sat huddled in the shadowed corner of the common room, her trembling fingers clasped a worn blanket around her shoulders, her eyes fixed on the flickering candlelight casting distorted shadows on the cracked walls. Suddenly, faint voices drifted from the guard station just beyond her range of hearing, sharp and clipped, yet oddly muffled by the storm's fury. She strained to catch the words. "A new transfer tonight, mysterious artifact. Unclaimed." Her pulse quickened, a prickling cold crawling down her spine. She pressed closer to her knees, her breath hitching as the memories flooded back. Her impulsive confession, the terrifying realization that she had admitted to murder, her voice trembling with the weight of unspoken truths. Did they really transfer something linked to the case tonight? She wondered, heart pounding so loudly she feared it might burst from her chest. Her mind spiraled, flashes of that terrible day. The frantic panic, the shattered moments of clarity, the hollow look in her grandfather's eyes as he'd fallen to the ground after a cry of agony. She remembered how her own trembling hands had betrayed her, How her desperate plea for mercy had been met with cold silence, and how guilt had swallowed her whole. The guard's muffled words stirred a different kind of unease. Perhaps it was coincidence. Or maybe the universe was finally nudging her to remember what she had tried so desperately to forget. She clenched her fists, feeling the rough fabric of her worn pants, then slowly stood, eyes darting toward the heavy steel door that separated her from the outside world, where the storm raged on. Step forward, her gaze fixed on the shadows flickering beyond the wall. She whispered to herself, "What if everything I remember is just a lie?" Her voice barely rose above a whisper, but her conviction grew stronger with every heartbeat, fueling the storm within her. The artifact, whatever it was, had become a symbol of the secrets that had defined her life. Secrets she was now compelled to confront, no matter how terrifying the truth might be. With trembling resolve, she moved toward the door, eager yet terrified, ready to face the ghostly echoes of her past, to peel back the layers of deception, and finally, perhaps, to understand the price of her own silence. Sitting alone in her cold, dimly lit cell, Ilara's trembling hands clutched her worn, threadbare blanket as a flood of memories crashed over her like relentless waves. The sterile smell of disinfectant and the distant echo of footsteps outside contrasted sharply with the vivid, haunting image of her grandfather's face, stern, weathered, shadowed by secrets she had tried to bury deep within her. Her eyes darted to the small cracked mirror on the wall, where her face looked hollow, haunted by sleepless nights and fractured guilt. Her throat tightened as she remembered how her voice had cracked when she finally cracked under the weight of her remorse. How, trembling, she had whispered, "I did it. I killed him." Her voice had barely escaped her lips, trembling with the weight of years of repression, tears streaming down her cheeks, mixing with the dust and grime on her face. She remembered the flickering fluorescent light casting long, trembling shadows as she sat on the cold cot, her heartbeat pounding like a drum in her ears. The words had spilled out in a rush. Her confession, a desperate, trembling release of a secret so heavy it had threatened to crush her. "I murdered him," she had sobbed, her voice breaking as she clung to the truth she thought would liberate her, finally unburdening her soul from the guilt that had haunted every waking moment. But as soon as her words escaped, a suffocating silence had fallen over the room, thick with anticipation and dread. She had looked up through blurred eyes, expecting relief. Relief that she might finally escape her torment. Instead, she felt a cold, hollow emptiness settle inside her, an overwhelming wave of shame and fear that this confession might only deepen her curse, cement her as a villain in her own story. Her fingers had trembled as she clung to the metal bars, whispering, "It's done. I said it. I'm free now." Yet beneath her trembling voice lurked a primal scream of regret, because deep down, she knew that some truths refused to stay buried, some wounds refused to heal, and that her words, meant to set her free, might instead chain her tighter to a past she could never undo. Her cheeks were damp with tears as she closed her eyes, feeling the faint, ghostly whisper of her grandfather's voice echoing in her mind, an echo that warned her, betrayed her, and perhaps held the key to unraveling a truth far darker than her own guilt. In that suffocating silence, she realized, with dread settling in her chest, that her confession was only the beginning of a journey into the shadows she'd long tried to escape. A journey that could finally reveal who truly bore the weight of that terrible night, and whether, in her desperate attempt at redemption, she had only sealed her own fate. Ilara stepped out into the thick fog that clung heavily to the silent streets, each breath fogging her lungs as the cold dampness seeped through her thin coat. The town, usually bustling with life, now felt like a ghostly husk, shadows stretching and twisting beneath the pale glow of flickering street lamps. Her footsteps echoed softly on the cracked pavement, but her mind replayed the haunting whispers that refused to fade. Over and over she heard her grandfather's voice, soft yet insistent, calling her name from the depths of her fractured memories. "You know the truth, Ilara. You've always known." The words crackled like static in her ears, blending with the rustling of dried leaves that skittered across the empty street. Her eyes darted to every shadow, every flicker of movement, each one a ghostly reminder of her guilt and the secrets she had tried to bury. As her pulse quickened, she caught sight of a shadowy figure flickering at the edge of her vision. Her mind betrayed her, with a hallucination of her grandfather's gaunt face. Every nerve in her body screamed that her hallucinations were not mere illusions, but fragments of a truth she refused to accept. Her mind waged war, reality blurred with nightmare. As she stumbled forward, her voice trembling, "Please, just leave me alone." Yet deep inside, she knew that the fog wasn't just a barrier from the world, but from her own fractured consciousness, and that her journey through the shadows had only just begun. An endless maze of memories, guilt and the ghostly echoes of her grandfather's accusations, each step pulling her further into a darkness that threatened to swallow her whole. Under the oppressive weight of the heavy, unyielding fog that clung to the cracked, peeling facade of her grandfather's abandoned house, Ilara slipped through a side window, her movements cautious yet driven by an urgent need to unearth the truth buried beneath years of silence. The air inside reeked of dust, mold, and long-forgotten secrets, each step stirring motes of decay that danced in the muted light, filtering through broken shutters. Her heartbeat echoed loudly in her ears as she moved silently through the dim, cluttered rooms, furniture draped in tattered sheets, faded photographs of her childhood, and strange artifacts hinting at a life shadowed by darkness. Her fingers trembled as she explored the creaking floorboards and dusty shelves, feeling the weight of unseen eyes watching her from the shadows. Suddenly, her hand brushed against a loose brick behind a faded bookcase, and with a quiet shudder, she pushed it aside, revealing a narrow, concealed compartment carved into the wall. Her eyes widened as she gently pried it open, revealing a small, weathered box lined with faded velvet. Inside, amidst a jumble of tarnished trinkets and crumpled papers, she found a torn, yellowed fragment of a journal page, its edges frayed and stained with age, yet the ink still legible in hurried, uneven strokes. The words scrawled across it whispered of secrets that shattered her understanding. "He knew what they hid, and I saw it, hidden beneath the floorboards. A truth too terrible to speak. The blood on his hands was only part of it." Her breath hitched as she clutched the fragile page, her eyes darting around the shadowed room as if expecting the ghost of her grandfather to materialize and demand an explanation. Her mind raced, trying to piece together the cryptic clues, her fingers trembling with a mixture of dread and curiosity. She whispered aloud, voice trembling, "What did you hide, grandfather? What did you really do?" The words hung heavy in the stale air, resonating with years of suppressed memories and unspoken accusations. Outside, the fog thickened, muffling the world beyond. But inside these decaying walls, a new and darker layer of the family secret had been revealed, a secret that threatened to demolish everything. She thought she knew about her past, about her guilt, and about the terrible truth lurking beneath her grandfather's quiet, haunted life. The torn journal piece clutched tightly in her hand. Ilara knew that her journey into the shadows was far from over. Instead, it had just begun to peel back the veils of deception woven into her family's history, pushing her closer to the terrifying truth she had always feared. In the dim, flickering glow of her makeshift hideout, Ilara carefully unfolded her grandfather's tattered journal, its leather cover cracked and stained from years of neglect. Her trembling fingers traced the faded ink on the fragile page, and her breath caught as she read the cryptic words, references to a clandestine family feud that ran deeper than she'd ever imagined, intertwined with occult rituals whispered about in hushed legends. The journal, smudged with age and secrets, revealed a disturbing pattern: her grandfather's involvement in dark ceremonies, sacrifices shrouded in mystery, and a concealed history of betrayal that cast new shadows over his death. Her eyes widened as she deciphered the faded handwriting, a mixture of sorrow and rage bleeding into the game. Her eyes darted to the shadows cast by the flickering candle, and for a moment she saw the ghostly outline of her grandfather's face, pleading silently for her to understand. Her heart ached with a mixture of dread and resolve. She knew that uncovering the truth about her family's dark legacy might shatter everything she'd ever believed. But she also sensed that ignoring it would condemn her to living in perpetual guilt, haunted forever by ghosts she dared not face. She closed the journal slowly, her fingers lingering on its roughened pages, and whispered a vow to herself. She would peel back every hidden layer, confront the occult darkness, and finally understand whether her guilt was justified or simply a consequence of blood-stained secrets buried deep beneath the surface of her fractured family history. Lara hesitated at the weathered door of the old cottage, her trembling hands clutching a crumpled photograph of her grandfather, now aged and shadowed in black and white. The air was thick with the scent of damp wood and moss, and the distant cawing of crows echoed through the sparse trees surrounding the crumbling porch. When she finally knocked, the door creaked open slowly, revealing a frail, wrinkled woman whose eyes shimmered with a mixture of kindness and quiet caution. "You must be Alara," the woman said softly, her voice gravelly yet gentle. "Come in, child." The interior was dim, filled with the faint aroma of dried herbs and aged paper. Alara stepped inside, her gaze immediately drawn to a dusty bookshelf lined with old tomes and faded photographs. The woman gestured toward a battered armchair by the fire, where she sat, eyes fixed on the flames dancing in silence. After a moment of tense silence, the woman finally spoke, voice barely above a whisper. "Your grandfather was a complex man, full of secrets. I knew him when he was younger, before the darkness took hold. There was something he dabbled in, darker than most could imagine. It wasn't just superstition or ritual. It was obsession, a hunger for power that bordered on madness." Ilara's heart hammered in her chest. "What do you mean? Was he involved in dark practices?" Her voice quivered, betraying her effort to sound composed. The woman nodded slowly, her eyes flickering with memories. "He believed he could commune with forces beyond our understanding. He went to great lengths. Hidden symbols carved into the walls, strange artifacts hidden in the cellar, strange rituals performed in the dead of night. I sensed it, but I was afraid to confront him. When he died..." She paused, voice trembling. "Some say it was an accident. Others whisper he was murdered, that someone else wanted what he possessed. But I think he was consumed by his own obsession, or perhaps by something darker, something that took him from us without warning." Ilara's breath hitched as her mind spun, her memories merging with the woman's words. "Are you saying he was involved in dark magic? Rituals that could have caused his death?" She leaned forward, desperation flickering in her eyes. The woman reached out her frail hand, gripping Ilara's tightly. "Be careful what you uncover, child. The truth can be a blade, cutting deeper than you realize. Whatever you think you know, whether it's guilt or innocence, it's only a fragment of what truly lies beneath. And sometimes, the past isn't just buried. It's waiting to claw its way out." Ilara stared into the fire, feeling the weight of her bloodline pressing down, the whispers of her grandfather's secrets echoing in her mind. Her skin prickled with a foreboding sensation, as if unseen eyes watched her from the shadows. In that moment, she understood that her quest for truth might unravel everything she believed, and that the darkness lurking in her family was far more sinister and ancient than she had ever dared imagine. Ilara's vision fractured like shattered glass, her surroundings dissolving into an impossible, twisted landscape where reality itself seemed to warp and bleed at the edges. The air thickened with a suffocating fog, tendrils of shadow curling around her limbs as the ground beneath her rippled like dark water. Suddenly, standing before her in this surreal nightmare, was her grandfather's spectral form, a gaunt, trembling silhouette cloaked in fading light, eyes hollow, yet burning with an urgent, pleading intensity, his voice distorted yet unmistakably his. Flashes of her grandfather's kind smile tainted with shadows and secrets. The ghost's voice grew louder, more insistent, reverberating like a scream from the depths of her subconscious. It wasn't murder, Alara. You only think it was because they've tricked you into believing so. The real story is buried deeper. Remember, the rituals, the curses, the blood that stained this family. The night he died, I never left his side. I begged him to run, to escape the poison they had poured into his soul. But the darkness was too strong. You have to remember, before they erase you too. Her surroundings shimmered and contorted, the landscape folding into itself like a nightmare unfolding in slow motion. Her vision blurred as spectral images flickered. Her grandfather's face contorted in pain, the flickering flame of a candle revealing symbols etched into the wall, and whispers echoing in her mind. Voices of the past, condemning or pleading, impossible to distinguish. Tears blurred her sight as her legs buckled, her trembling hands clutching at the air as if to grasp the fading remnants of her memory. The ghostly figure reached out once more, voice now a whisper carried on a wind of despair. It's not your fault, child. You were made to forget. The truth is a blade, and it's time you wielded it. Only then can you be free. As the spectral form dissolved into a mist of darkness, Alara's consciousness teetered on the brink, her mind a battlefield of conflicting truths and hallucinated horrors, desperately trying to cling to the fragments of reality amid the chaos, knowing deep in her core that her journey to remember, to truly understand her guilt, would forever alter her perception of herself and her family's haunted, sinister legacy. Alara's trembling fingers pushed aside the thick dust and moth-eaten cloths that had long concealed the attic's hidden secret. Her heart thrummed fiercely in her chest as she discovered a heavy carved wooden box, sealed with an iron latch tarnished by time. With cautious reverence, she pried it open, revealing a trove of photographs and artifacts cloaked in shadows. A tangle of faded images depicting her grandfather in strange rituals, symbols scrawled hastily on yellowed paper, and worn talismans entwined with faded ribbons. The photographs told stories she had never known. Her grandfather, surrounded by shadowy figures in dark robes, whispering over cryptic symbols etched into stone altars. Her breath hitched as she picked up a photograph of a candlelit circle, the flickering flame casting eerie shadows that seemed to dance and twist, almost alive. Among the relics was a tarnished silver pendant engraved with unfamiliar symbols, its edges chipped and blackened with age. She traced her fingers over the carvings, feeling a cold dread seep into her bones. A faint, trembling whisper echoed in her mind, one she recognized as her grandfather's voice, speaking in riddles she couldn't understand. "The shadows hide the truth," he'd said once, voice thick with secrecy. "And sometimes the truth must be buried to keep the darkness at bay." Her eyes widened as she uncovered a small, leather-bound journal, its pages filled with frantic handwriting, sketches of symbols, and notes in a language that looked almost like a cipher. Her fingers hesitated over an illustration of a strange, swirling vortex with the words, "The boundary between life and death is thinner than you think." A cold sweat broke out as she realized the artifacts pointed to more than superstition. They hinted at occult practices, rituals intended to summon or control, forces beyond mortal comprehension. Her mind raced with questions. Had her grandfather been involved in dark dealings? Was his death merely the consequence of human treachery, or was something more sinister at play? As she clutched the relics, her pulse pounding in her ears, she felt the weight of the past pressing down on her, an invisible hand guiding her to the truth, buried just beyond the reach of clarity. They hovered silently, their presence both oppressive and accusing, as if they carried the weight of secrets she was only beginning to uncover. Her trembling fingers clutched her head, and her voice barely escaped trembling lips. It's just my mind. It's just... But why are they here? The ghostly figures shifted closer, their forms flickering between solid and mist, their eyes hollow yet somehow pleading. Every breath she took felt shallow, sticky with the scent of dust and decay, the air thick with the tang of old secrets and unspoken guilt. Her body stiffened as she saw the faint outline of her grandfather's face emerging in the shadows. Eyes sunken, familiar yet distorted. Eyes that seemed to pierce her, demanding answers she could not provide. "You're not real. This isn't real," she whispered through clenched teeth. But the shadows responded with a whisper echoing in her mind, a chorus of her own suppressed memories and fears. Her vision blurred, the boundaries dissolving between hallucination and reality. Her hands trembled violently as she tried to brush away the figures, only for them to retreat briefly, only to reappear with a more sinister intent. Her breath hitched and she staggered toward the mirror, seeking refuge in her reflection. But the glass warped her image, revealing a fractured version of herself, eyes hollow with despair, hair tangled and matted, trembling as if she was falling apart from the inside out. "Tell me what you want," she begged, voice trembling between desperation and madness, her fingers digging into her scalp. The shadows whispered back, their voices layered with her own doubts and guilt, twisting her perception until she couldn't tell whether she was seeing ghosts of the past or hallucinations born from her fractured mind. The room spun, the flickering candle casting fleeting flashes of her grandfather's face, now more spectral than ever, with a sorrowful expression that seemed to cry out for justice, for truth, or perhaps for release. As her breath quickened into ragged gasps, the shadows closed in, pressing against her consciousness, threatening to drown her in a storm of memories, fears, and spectral figures that blurred the lines between her haunted past and her unraveling present. The air between Ilara and her closest friend, Marcus, thickened with unspoken tension, but her mind, frayed and tangled in shadows, pushed her beyond restraint. As they sat beneath the flickering glow of a dying lantern in the abandoned shed, its walls lined with peeling paint and whispers of forgotten secrets, her eyes darted wildly, searching for threats in every flicker of movement. Marcus had been gentle, patient even, but tonight her paranoia spiraled beyond control. Her voice cracked, trembling yet edged with a desperate accusation. "You know more than you're telling me," she hissed, voice quivering like a fragile glass about to shatter, her fingers clenched into fists, trembling as she pressed them against her temples, trying to drown out the relentless whispers of her fractured memories. "Don't deny it. I saw you sneaking around the estate yesterday. You're hiding something, aren't you? You're in on it, I know you are. Don't lie to me." Marcus's eyes widened in alarm, hands raised in a calming gesture, but Ilara's mind twisted his innocent expression into proof of betrayal. To her, his calmness seemed like a mask, an elaborate deception. Her breath hitched, her voice rising in a frantic, almost feral tone. "You've always known more than you said. You're protecting him, protecting the lies. How could you? How could anyone stay silent when everything's been buried in blood and darkness?" She lunged forward, her trembling hands reaching out as if to seize the truth from him. But her movements were unsteady, as if she might collapse at any moment. Shadows danced around them, flickering like ghosts of her own fractured mind, phantoms that whispered accusations of betrayal, guilt, and concealment. Marcus's face flickered in her distorted perception. His features melted as her fractured psyche shattered all boundaries between what was real and what was just a nightmare, whispering its way into her soul. Ilara's heart pounded like a frantic drum as she slipped into the dim, dust-choked silence of the town's archives, her fingers trembling as she carefully lifted the brittle cover of a faded legal ledger tucked away behind layers of yellowed newspapers and neglected files. Shadows clung to the corners, and the only sound was the soft scrape of her nails against the paper, her breath hitching with a mixture of dread and determination. The flickering fluorescent bulb cast an eerie glow over the documents, illuminating a pattern of names and dates that twisted her stomach into knots. As she flipped through the pages, her eyes caught a sequence of handwritten notes, annotations that hinted at clandestine meetings, secret transfers of property, and a sharp, hurried scribble beside her grandfather's signature, which looked out of place among the meticulous records. Her pulse quickened when she saw the name of Robert Grayson, a distant relative no one dared speak about openly. His name buried beneath layers of legal jargon, but now glaring out with undeniable prominence. "What is this?" she whispered, voice husky with shock, clutching the edges of the document tightly as if holding on to her sanity. Her mind raced with the implications, the possibility that her grandfather's death might not have been as innocent as it seemed, that Robert Grayson had orchestrated it to secure his grip on the family estate. She dared to read on, unearthing a series of concealed affidavits, notarized evidence of a fierce power struggle, and payments made in secret, all pointing toward Robert's ruthless ambition. Her brow furrowed as she noticed the dates, just weeks before her grandfather's fatal collapse, and the peculiar absence of official death reports. Her fingers curled into fists, the cold metal of her grandmother's locket pressing against her palm, as if anchoring her to a truth she desperately wanted to deny. She leaned back against the dusty shelves, heart pounding so loudly she feared it would betray her, and whispered to the empty room. Was this the real reason he died? Did Robert Grayson kill him to take everything? Her voice trembled, crackling with a mixture of fury and despair. Tears welled up unbidden as the weight of her discovery settled over her like a shroud. An unspoken conspiracy lurking beneath the facade of respectability, now threatening to tear her fragile mind apart. In that cold, shadowed corner of the archive, she knew she held the key to unraveling the dark, tangled web of her family's secrets. But with every revelation, she also realized her quest for truth might plunge her even deeper into the abyss, perhaps into a truth so terrible that it would threaten to swallow her whole. Alara stared into the shattered mirror's jagged fragments, her reflection fractured into dozens of trembling shards that caught glimmers of fading daylight, casting distorted, flickering images across the dusty room. Her breath hitched as a sudden, oppressive silence enveloped her, broken only by the faint whisper of her own heartbeat pounding in her ears. Then, unmistakably, a deep, gravelly voice echoed from the shadows. Her grandfather's voice, rasping with a sinister edge yet strangely familiar, seeped into her consciousness as if summoned from the depths of her fractured mind. "You betrayed me, Alara," it hissed, each word dripping with accusatory venom. Her eyes widened, pupils dilating as the voice grew louder, more insistent, filling the space with a ghostly presence that seemed to seep from the twisted reflections. As her trembling hands clutched the cold, broken glass, the room spun into a dizzy whirl of darkness and light, shadows dancing around her like sinister specters. "Did you really kill me?" The voice sneered, distorted, as if 1,000 voices whispered in unison. Alara's pulse thundered so fiercely that she feared her own scream might shatter the fragile glass in her grip. Her trembling fingers brushed the cold metal of the locket around her neck, a relic from her past, clutching portraits and tarnished chandeliers, while a biting chill curled around her neck, as if the house itself exhaled memories long buried. The air was thick with the scent of damp wood, mold, and something metallic, an echo of violence that refused to fade. As she moved deeper into the vast, dilapidated hall, a soft whispering filled the silence, indistinct yet unmistakably urgent, curling around her ears like a sinister lullaby. "You know the truth!" A ghostly voice rasped from the shadows, trembling with unresolved grief and rage. Alara's breath hitched. Her eyes darted across the darkness, catching fleeting glimpses of translucent figures. Her ancestors, perhaps, or fractured phantoms of her own mind, dancing within the swirling mists of her subconscious. The floor beneath her felt alive, pulsing faintly with the heartbeat of secrets too long suppressed. She paused before a massive, dust-choked mirror, its surface fractured like her fractured memories, and stared into its shattered reflection. Her own face, gaunt and shadowed, stared back, eyes hollow with dread and longing. "Come closer," a voice beckoned, echoing from within the mirror's fractured depths, "and see what lies beneath the broken glass." Terrified yet compelled, Hilara knelt before the mirror, fingertips trembling as she reached out and traced the jagged cracks. The glass rippled like water, and suddenly, images flooded her mind. Her childhood laughter, her grandfather's stern face, the night of his death, clouded, distorted yet painfully vivid. The whispers intensified, swirling into a crescendo of voices, pleading, accusing, pleading, until a figure emerged from the shadows behind her, translucent and hollow-eyed. It was her grandfather, his voice echoing with pain and betrayal. "You thought you knew the truth," he whispered, voice trembling with anguish. "But you only saw the surface. Beneath lies the darkness you refuse to face." Hilara's knees buckled as icy tears streamed down her face. The estate's ghostly apparitions closed in, shadows pressing against her skin, whispering secrets she could no longer ignore. With a shudder, she turned away from the mirror, clutching her chest as the house seemed to breathe around her, alive with the memories she had tried to suppress. Her mind spun with fractured visions, her own guilt tangled with spectral specters, until, in a whisper of resolve, she whispered back, "I will remember, and I will face whatever haunted these walls." In that haunted twilight, surrounded by ghostly whispers and fading echoes of her family's dark history, Hilara finally confronted the raw, buried truth, one that threatened to shatter her entirely, but also hold the key to her salvation. In the dim, moonlit silence of the ruined estate, Hilara's trembling form dissolved into a surreal tableau of fractured memories and spectral whispers. Her eyes fluttered shut as the boundaries between reality and hallucination blurred, and suddenly she found herself standing in a shadowed corridor lined with peeling wallpaper and flickering candlelight, the air thick with the scent of damp wood and forgotten secrets. From the darkness emerged the ghostly figure of her grandfather, his face gaunt, eyes hollow, yet burning with an unspoken anguish. His voice, rasping yet insistent, echoed through the empty halls. "You think you know the truth, child. You believe your confession freed you, but it only buried the real darkness deeper beneath the surface." Hilara's breath hitched as she staggered forward, clutching her chest, tears streaming down her face. I thought I was doing what was right," she whispered, voice cracking. "But I only hurt myself." The ghost's form flickered, shadows swirling like smoke, and he reached out with a trembling hand, voice trembling with pain. "You killed me, yes, but not with your hands. Your mind still shattered by betrayal and despair. Face it, Hilara. Your true torment is the ghost within that refuses to be laid to rest, the chaos of memories that refuse to align, and the truth that your mind has buried deep in the darkness. Only in accepting this fractured truth can you find peace. Only then can you truly begin to heal." As his voice faded into the shadows, Hilara staggered back, tears blending with the rain that seeped through the broken windows, the ghostly whispers echoing around her like a funeral dirge. Her trembling hands clutched her head as the spectral apparition dissolved into mist, leaving her alone in the suffocating silence, trembling with the profound realization that her confession was not a testament of truth but a reflection of her shattered psyche, a ghostly echo of a trauma she must finally confront if she was ever to escape her own haunted mind. The rain hammered relentlessly against the cracked windows of the abandoned estate, its rhythmic drumming echoing through the hollow halls like the heartbeat of a long-dead beast. Hilara stood in the center of what once was her grandfather's study, trembling not from the chill but from a revelation that had slowly unraveled within her, like threads pulled from a tattered tapestry. Her eyes, haunted and feverish, flicked over the fractured mirror shards strewn across the dusty floor, each reflecting fragments of her fractured mind. "It wasn't me," she whispered, voice cracking with a mix of despair and fierce clarity. Her trembling fingers brushed her temple as if trying to wipe away the hallucinations, the ghostly visions of her grandfather's pleading face, the whispers of betrayal echoing in her ears. It was someone else. Someone else all along. Her knees buckled, and she sank onto the cold wooden planks, clutching her head as memories flickered like violent lightning. Flashes of shadowy figures lurking in the darkness, whispers of secret meetings, the clandestine rituals she'd uncovered in her grandfather's hidden journal, the weight of her confession, the admission she'd made after years of torment, pressed down on her chest, suffocating her in its falsehood. She remembered the moment she'd broken, trembling before the authorities, voice trembling but resolute. I killed him. Yet now, in the wreckage of her mind, she realized the truth was far more complicated, buried beneath layers of trauma and deception. Tears blurred her vision as she looked up at the peeling wallpaper, the faded portrait of her grandfather staring from a dusty frame, his eyes dark with secrets she'd never truly understood. I was wrong, she choked out, voice thick with regret. I thought I was protecting him, or myself, but I was just running from the real monster. Her breath hitched as she grasped the edges of the shattered mirror, seeing her reflection fractured and distorted like her soul. It wasn't me, she repeated fiercely. And I have to face that. What's real, what's been hidden, what I've refused to see. The room seemed to breathe with her, shadows curling in the corners, waiting to swallow her whole if she faltered. But in that storm of darkness, a fragile sense of peace seeped in, an acceptance that her mind's chaos was part of her, that the truth she sought was not in guilt, but in unraveling the web of lies that had enshrouded her family for generations. She whispered one last time, voice steadier now. It wasn't me, and only when I accept that can I finally begin to heal. As the rain subsided into a mournful hush, Ilara rose slowly, her silhouette lit by the flickering remnants of a dying lightning bolt, stepping into the shadows with a newfound resolve. A quiet acknowledgement that her salvation lay not in denying the truth, but in embracing its terrifying complexity. In the dim glow of dawn, Ilara sat alone in the remnants of her small, cluttered room, clutching her battered journal as if it were a lifeline. The rain had finally ceased, leaving behind a damp silence. But I have to believe there's more to me than that. I have to believe I can find peace in this chaos. With trembling fingers, she dipped her pen, inscribing words that felt like both a confession and a prayer. This is my journey, my broken, imperfect truth. I forgive myself. I forgive him for the darkness that haunted us, for the guilt I carried even when I didn't understand it. I release the shame, the guilt, the anger, and embrace the fragile hope that maybe, just maybe, I can finally heal, not by erasing what happened, but by accepting that even in my fractured memory, I am still worthy of redemption. This is my testament, my cry into the void, that I am more than my mistakes, and that, in facing the chaos within, I might find the strength to forgive myself and finally step into the light. As she closed the journal gently, a quiet resolve settled over her, an acceptance that her truth was messy and imperfect, but undeniably real. In that fragile moment, Ilara understood that her salvation lay not in denial, but in embracing her flawed, shattered self, knowing that only through that acknowledgement could she begin to truly heal and forge a future free from the shadows of her past. Ilara stood at the edge of the small town square, a weathered journal clutched tightly in her trembling hands as the late afternoon sun cast long shadows over the cracked cobblestones. For months she had spoken openly about her harrowing journey, her confession, the hallucinations, the tangled web of family secrets. And now, as the weight of her truth finally settled into her bones, she felt an unexpected flicker of peace. She had chosen to remain here, amidst the same silent streets where her childhood memories still lurked like ghosts. She wanted to face her trauma head-on, not hide from it. Her voice carried softly as she addressed the gathered crowd, the words raw but steady. I've carried darkness I didn't fully understand, guilt that ate away at my soul. But I realize that healing begins when we accept the truth we have buried, no matter how painful. Her eyes flickered to the old family estate looming in the distance, its windows dark and broken, a symbol of her fractured past. She remembered the nights she spent wandering its abandoned halls, the whispers of her grandfather's ghost echoing through her mind, urging her to remember the hidden horrors that had claimed his life. I used to believe I was a monster, she admitted, voice trembling with vulnerability. But now I see that I was only a victim of lies and manipulation, just as much as I was a girl trapped in her own mind. Tears welled in her eyes as she paused, inhaling sharply before continuing. I want to break the cycle, to speak openly about what happened, so others won't feel so alone in their darkness. I've decided to stay here to build a new life from the ruins of my pain. I will work to heal what was shattered, not erase it. And in doing so, I hope to find the strength to forgive myself, to mend what's broken inside. Her voice cracked, but she held firm, feeling the weight of her words settle like a gentle tide washing over her. She took a step forward, meeting the eyes of those gathered, strangers and friends alike. And with a quiet resolve, she whispered, "This is my truth, imperfect and fragile as it is, but it's mine. And finally, I can begin to live with it." As the crowd softened in understanding, Ulara turned toward her faded family home, not as a place of darkness, but as a symbol of